can I tell you something kind of embarrassing?
Yeah.
So, do you remember
Do
when I...
I do I do I have to do it back?
No,
Okay, great.
no
You say the
pressure.
embarrassing thing, it'd be fine. My name's
So,
Helen.
well,
Just in
how
case you forgot my
embarrassing.
name.
Helen, I'm gonna tell you something embarrassing then. So, do you remember when I came to visit you in your little performance hut?
Yep.
And I bought your book, even with your shoes on, and then I was going off to Amsterdam after that, and then I was gonna
Yeah.
go back to Canada. So I
Yeah.
I
In
got
the
your book.
snow. That and it was snowing, wasn't it?
It
Yeah.
was massive
Yeah.
snow. So anyway, my bag was really full because I was traveling in London for a few weeks, and then Amsterdam, and then yeah, so I was chock full. And I was in a hostel in Amsterdam, and I was reading the first couple chapters of your book, and and then I realized I couldn't fit your book in my bag to bring home. So I ended up I hemmed and hawed about it. I was like, oh, what do I do? It's so rude if I just abandon this book, like, and I want to finish it. But so I ended up leaving it in the hostel on the bed. And I really, really hope that some person has found it and it just inspired the shit out of them to start running. So if someone is listening and you found a book called Even With Your Shoes On by Helen Hall in a hostel in London, or was it London? It might have been London. Yeah, it must have been London in January of 2019. And now you're a fucking elite runner. We would love to know that you exist.
Well, I think that's called paying it forward and good karma, isn't it? So I think that I would like to think that something magical happened, that you'd read enough of what you needed and it was too heavy because it's a kilo, and let's face it, when you're traveling, a kilo, yeah, it's dense, it's thick, it's a kilo, yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
So you clear for your travels, you did the right thing, and you traveled lighter, and you read the first few chapters, and then somebody else would have hopefully taken up the baton. It's probably a relay book, and maybe it's done the rounds.
Oh,
Maybe
I
it's gone
really
around the
hope.
globe.
I really hope so. I hope that someone somehow hears this and can tell us exactly that. And I really wish I'd
Well,
gotten to read the rest of it because that's where all the good stuff is with how to help your body. But I read your story and a bit about your philosophy about why you wrote the book in the first place, which I really appreciate that stuff. So, but anyway, the one of the reasons I wanted to speak with you is really because of how much you've impacted me, Helen. Which you may not know that whole, well, maybe you do, but I don't know. You probably don't know just how much you have. And you know a shitload about the body from all the way from infant development to upright joint mechanics to top level running performance and you help people with movement based solutions and I think it's really fascinating what you do. So I figured let's just get
well,
right into it and hear about what it is that you do. So maybe for those who don't know anything about you, how would you describe your professional title and what you do?
I absolutely don't have a professional title. That's the easy part to the question, the easy answer part to the question. So I problem solve movement problems with movement. Uh, so I dive in with movement front and center and look for what is at the root of this person still struggling. Because I feel as if we are so good, our bodies are so resilient, they're so good at self-organizing that if things aren't able to get better, so if you're still cutting your hair and cutting your nails, and if your skin gets cut and it heals, then you are still a self-organizing, self-healing organism. So if your pains won't go away, if you keep getting injured, in more or less the same place, in more or less the same cycle. Why? So you'll have done all of the things looking at the site of the pain, almost certainly. So say it's a knee. So you'll have strengthened the knee and stretched the muscles around the knee and massaged the knee and foam rollered around the knee maybe. You'd have done all of the what is the accepted normal. And I do that with the rabbit's ears wrapped around the normal. And for some, that is the solution and it works. And for others, it doesn't. And so, and of course, you know all of this, we do the same thing. We look at we look further, deeper, further back, deeper into the mechanisms that are generating the pain. And for me, it's not getting more and more complex. For me, it's about getting simpler and simpler. We are so complex, so interconnected, that if we dive into the microscopic, into the micro, we're very likely to get lost down a rabbit hole of teeny tiny problems. And it doesn't make sense to me because we're resilient. So we come out, we zoom out to the meta, and then we zoom out on top of that. I heard a phrase just the other day, meta, which I'd never heard before. And I thought, oh, meta, that's what I do. I don't just zoom out. It's like, no, zoom out again. No, go back further. Not necessarily back in time with the injury cycle, but back to the beginning, right back to the things that people think can't possibly be connected to their current problem. Let's go back there. Meta, apparently. So yes, I don't have a professional title. I just don't stop until I have several ambiguous hypotheses of what might be going on. Then I test the hypotheses using the most advanced motion tech in the world to see if I'm on the right track. And Doris will guide me and say, yeah, probably on the right track, continue, or nope, think again. And I retrace my steps and think again. So I do a lot of thinking. So somebody else in any other field would be a systems thinker. But people don't often think of systems thinking in the context of human movement. They'll think of systems thinking in the context of computations, algebraic equations, mathematical things, all very scientific things. But the truth of it all lies in logic, science, intuition, and imagination in equal parts. If you consider Ian McGilchrist's definition of the truth to be the truth. So he is an amazing neuroscientist and philosopher. So the truth is equal parts logic, science, intuition, and imagination. And I love that.
Yeah. Who was the one who said something about paradox being the ultimate truth? I don't know who it was.
No, but I'm going to write
Some
it down.
philosopher. Something about paradox. No paradox, no truth. But I
Wow.
like what you said about the system. The body is a system, and you're right. It's maybe a little bit more difficult than a computer type system because we do have these things like you mentioned, the intuitive and imagination side of things. We have a lot of factors that we can't really measure with Doris. And we'll get to what Doris is for those who don't know. But we can measure the mechanical, factual part that we can see. But unlike a computer, there's a lot going on that we can't see, which we have to use our imagination to make a hypothesis about. And we have to use our intuition to follow a thread that might not be something that an AI algorithm would pick up on. And this is why our human brains, I think, are so valuable to use. But I want to circle back, put a pin on Doris, and circle back to what you said about meta and about how it goes all the way back to the beginning, and to put that into context for people. So Helen does some very cool shit with understanding infant reflexes, or how would you like to describe it? Would you like to say primary reflexes,
No,
infant
no, I don't say
reflexes?
any of that.
Oh, you don't?
It, yeah, no, it feels if I my I tend to work with adults,
Hmm.
and if you and the labels, words are more powerful than atom bombs. That quote's in my book. Handle them carefully, for words have more power than atomic bombs. And that was written by a poet, uh, um, Pamela something or other. So I'm so sorry, Pamela, for forgetting your surname, but you're in my book, and I ascribe to that philosophy daily. I'm very careful with my words, which is why it's really hard. I don't like being labeled because that's pinning me down into a corner. And and as soon as you label anything, you've pinned it into a box, a corner, um, a tighter boundary than I would prefer. If we don't have boundaries, it can feel so ginormous, it just messes with your head. So we have boundaries to help us stay sane, I feel. Uh, and it's almost like it gives us shorthand and a quick way of thinking, but it also limits. So if so I know we've pinned Doris,
Hmm.
but if we think of the system, the whole system as a structure, within that structure, of course, we've got the physical structure, the muscles, the tendons, the ligaments, the skeleton, the organs, all of the tissue that wraps around absolutely everything. But of course, we can think of the organs in a fascial bag, and then and that's sort of that's like meta. And then the micro people will come along and say, "Oh yes, but the connective tissue is wrapped around every cell." But that doesn't help me in the analysis of movement and structure. So that's kind of going micro, wait, too teeny tiny. So we backtrack and we think, okay, we've got the fascia wrapping around an organ. Okay, so meta, where does that then sit within the entire structure that has the boundary of us seeing the edges of that human being? So, and of course, it's in 3 dimensions unless we're looking at a screen. And of course, we are an energetic field as well. And then the boundaries of us get blurry because our skin is not literally the end of us. But then we get into the metaphysical and super duper complicated, but still arguably relevant. But you can only do so much in a 5 hour appointment. So it's with the boundaries of common sense so that we don't go down too many rabbit holes. We look at what might be the system's limiter. So the system is working well. Everything seems to be working. Food is going in, waste is coming out, heart is beating, the organs are working. And for some bizarre reason, this right knee is not getting better. What within that entire system is withholding a healing from that knee?
Hmm.
And and so, it can be an old injury, and so we stay within the joint mechanics world. And it can be, well, there's absolutely no reason at all. There is no remembered physical reason for that knee to not be getting better. So then we think, okay, well, then it's something else. It must. So what could it be? And of course, pain is. You listen to the pain scientist, and it's multifactorial. But then we get into the micro again, and we don't know quite what to do with it. So then we can just follow a logical and science-based study of movement development. So it's a very long way of saying what I call it. When I work originally, I worked when I mentioned infant development whilst I was working with an adult, I could see they switched off. I had lost them. Because they were clearly, I'm stuck here in this room with this woman. It was all getting very interesting. And now she's talking about infant development and I want to go home. So it's been a very exponential learning curve as to the words to use to get a simple message across to enable people to help themselves. Because to reorganize the brain, I can't do it. Only they can do it. So I have to find a way to explain everything that makes sense to them. And rather helpfully, Doris can measure for me, and we can make progress that way too. So it started off with infant development that led to frustrations, and then at that time, when I was diving more into it, and of course it was called primitive reflexes, which I think is a very unfortunate term. It's just generally, in the world we live in, primitive reflexes are an unfortunate term. So I just thought, well, I don't want to call it that. And then people were coming in with labels such as, oh, I have a retained primitive reflex. And I'm thinking, what? Really? Do you? Are you sure? And I revert back to Byron Katie. I always get it wrong way around, Katie Byron. Byron Katie's work. Really? Are you sure that's true? Are you absolutely, absolutely sure that's true? And we have this conversation. And of course, it's a regurgitation of what has been said. And it's not that it's wrong. It gives, for me, an unempowering message. I am giving away the autonomy over my knee to this random label of a retained primitive reflex. And in my experience, if that person approaches it under the title, in the boundaries of the box of a retained primitive reflex as an adult, then the results, in my experience, aren't as good as if you just call it movement development. The boundaries are still present, but they're lifelong, and they're just the development of movement, which is developing all the time because we are neuroplastic and soft wired. So we can change all of these things if we identify what needs changing, and we're not stuck with anything.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna start calling it movement development now, early movement development, because I know what you mean. I've
Oh,
encountered the same kind of resistance, not resistance, but you can just tell when you're talking with someone, and you bring up the term infant reflex, and you just feel something shift in the energy between you. And some people, it's
yeah.
a lovely shift, like they embrace it fully because it fully resonates with them. And other people, I think the mentality is if it happened way long ago, then surely it doesn't matter anymore. Why are we going there?
Yeah. And I explain to people what it is. And I say, you know, it just because the baby, you as an infant, got to do it first doesn't mean to say it's only for infants. So you just did it first. But of course you did it first. You were an infant. I mean, what else are you going to do? You're going to go through the movement development. And of course, everybody is familiar with the movement milestones. So it is, but then it is parked. And then there's this very gray area where after you've reached the milestones, well, what happens then? So an 8-year-old, well, are we still talking? What are we talking now? Well, this isn't infant development anymore. But of course it is. I mean, the vestibular system is not mature in anyone below the age of 7. The absolute earliest the vestibular system is mature is age 7.
Mm.
So, get to 8 and that person might still be organizing their vestibular system.
Mm.
But it and that would be movement development, but you couldn't call it infant development
Mm.
because it's not done in infancy. And then you go from there, flip through the nebulous area of 7 and 8-year olds. Well, what are we talking now? We're talking pediatrics, but they're not, in my experience, pediatricians are not connecting, even though it's sort of the next era on from infancy, they're not connecting the infant development to pediatrics because it's not called movement development.
Mm.
And I think if it was called movement development, everybody would, because it would be like, well, this is movement development.
Mhm.
And well, it might be. Let's just think, well, let's just park the boundaries and just see, is this movement development? It's a quick and easy exploration
Mm.
to see if that movement pattern is organized. And if it is, great. It's not that, move on. And if it isn't, great. Because if
Mm.
you work with the youngsters, it comes on board almost instantly. And then you
Mm.
get into the very nebulous area of double digits, and nobody really quite knows what to do with double digit children. And then are we child? Are we puberty? Are we youth? Um, and then something that will have stayed disorganized throughout. Now, when you're an adult, oh, well, that's an ACL injury,
Mm.
where it wasn't an ACL injury in the first place. It was all to do with movement development. And that foot is rigid, not because it doesn't have the joint mechanics for it, but because the wiring is such that the only answer, or the best answer the brain has got for that foot, is to stay rigid.
Mm. Mhm.
It's certainly an option, and it's certainly a strategy, and the brain has quite a few options. So I created a story called the Lego story, where I describe what the reflex is, and it's the knobbly bit on a piece of Lego. And then the knobbly bit on the piece of Lego gets used multiple times and explored. And then instead of it sort of almost being, I'm changing the story now, but if you think of um, the same poles coming towards each other and then forcing each other apart, they can't connect with anything because they're still reflexive. There's a level of automaticity, and the toes pinging up no matter what if you stroke a certain part of the foot, and the toe's going to ping up no matter what. And then gradually, we don't have the toe pinging. The toe can ping, but there is more autonomy over the toe pinging and less automaticity of the toe pinging. So then we can then marry the toe pinging to maybe an ankle flexion and a rotation of the shin bone, or maybe an ankle opening. So a dorsiflexion, so the closing of the ankle or the opening of the ankle. I know you know what dorsiflexion and plantarflexion is, but you know what I mean for the people listening who everybody talks about flexing an ankle, and then everybody then says which way, and you think, oh, okay, all right. So dorsiflexion, so toes up, turning the shin bone, and equally toes down, turning the shin bone. So in my experience, people don't know that the foot needs to move for the ankle to change shape, for the shin bone to rotate.
Mm.
And you think, okay, well, if you don't know that and the knee continues to hurt, should we have a look to see if the foot or the toe is moving the foot, is moving the ankle, is moving the shin bone? And if we
Mm.
find, and I'm telling a story I see all the time, of course, if we find that actually there's no rotation of the shin bone at all, then maybe we've just happily bumped into one of the reasons that the knee might not be able to get better now that it's got to the point where it's hurting all the time. And it's nothing to do with
Mm.
the knee.
Yeah.
It's to do with the pinging toe that still has a level of automaticity that isn't helpful in an upright uh, I was going to say grown up. I'm going to an upright human, let's say beyond double digits. So,
Yeah.
uh, so the Lego story talks about infant development, and let's actually talk about it and apply it to movement problems that stick around in my dreams before I probably got another 40 years, I think. I'm 61, and I think I've got at least another 40 years of learning and piecing these things together. And by the time I go in whatever century that is, I'm not quite, yeah, so probably this century, isn't it? So I was never very good at mental arithmetic. So by the time I go, my my vision and my mission is that, well, let's just check those first. Let's just check that our movement development is organized first before we do anything fancy, because this is innate, foundational, fundamental movement patterns. And if we want to build complex movements into our amazing bodies, we better make sure we've got the fundamentals down first.
Mm.
So going back to the movement development, it was infant development until you're no longer an infant, but it's still happening. So we can't call it infant development. It's only movement development, but it is at the stage of infancy, and then as we go along our whole lives. And we know that movement development is relevant our whole lives. So infant with the rabbit's ears around the infant development is relevant our whole lives. Therefore, it cannot be called infant development, and it cannot be called primary reflex or anything like that, because it's no longer doing that job. It's now interfering. So what do we call it then? Well, it's just a mess. Just, it's just disorganized. And we know it's forever, our whole lives, because they've even made films about it. So the film Concussion, I think it's by Will Smith and with Will Smith in it, is all about the carnage that can happen with movement development that was organized, and these are elite NFL players. You get enough bonks to the head, and some of that movement organization gets disorganized, and movement patterns revert to the level of the automaticity of the original movement pattern reflex. And then they can't function as an elite athlete anymore, because they haven't got autonomy over their body, and they're scratching their heads trying to figure out why they can't get better. And then they discovered that actually it was these elements of movement development that needed to be reorganized back to where they were before they'd been bonked on the head for the umpteenth time. And that was the tipping point of that athlete not being able to move as well as they could. So we know it is. There's enough science out there for us to be as certain as is possible in science, because nothing is absolutely certain. There aren't any absolutes. So I retract about we know. We're pretty sure. The royal we, this is obviously, I'm not a neuroscientist, but this is all the brain scientists I learned from. They are pretty sure that that's pretty certain about the initial reflexes. So that's what I call them. I call them initial reflexes along the timeline of movement development, which starts in the womb and ends when we pop our clogs.
Yeah, I like that way of describing it. You have your early development, and then you have your lifelong adaptation to your early development and life, and it never stops.
Never stops, which is lovely, because it expands, it pushes the boundaries out for both um, our movement potential and our movement potential performance. So I'm always looking at the elite athletes and thinking, I think that they could go faster. Or, I think that they could jump further or higher. Oh, they're elite and they train really hard and they're dedicated and all of that stuff. And there are patterns that you see and you think, oh, is that pattern organized? Could you go in and test it and see if it's organized? And if it wasn't organized, organize it a bit better and then see what pops out within the self-organizing entire system that we are. How would that emerge in their whole system if their whole system is moving with this background element of movement development being a little bit disorganized? So, in spite of that background element of movement development not being quite organized, they are still an elite athlete. But what would happen if it was organized? The potential just feels very exciting.
It is exciting. Maybe this is a good time for me to tell you a story. Another story. This one's not embarrassing. Um,
Great.
but it's about how it'll put into context everything you're saying so people can understand exactly the impact looking at early development of movement can have. So when we met, I was in London and I didn't know you yet, but I knew you did some cool shit with movement and you had very generously offered to take a look. I think this was 2019, so I don't know if you had been. When did you get Doris? Was
Oh,
that pretty recently?
yeah. So the initial tech was 2014. And then
Okay.
Doris, so but that could only measure more accurately than an X-ray up to 6.5K. And they said you could run on it. And it's like, well, 6.5 kilometers an hour is not really running. So, a little trot, but it wasn't really very helpful. So it was walking. So we could get up to fast walking, measuring more accurately than an X-ray. And then in 2019, 23rd of October, 2019, Doris was installed and she could measure more accurately than an
Ah,
X-ray up to 30 kilometers an hour, which a couple of pro athletes have tried to get to and have failed. My eyes have been popping out of my head thinking, oh dear God, we need a crash mat. They're going to ping off any moment. But they didn't. They didn't. So 26 kilometers an hour is the fastest she has gone, but she can measure more accurately than an X-ray up to 30 kilometers an hour. So you arrived,
okay.
I'd had Doris as that level of tech for a couple of months when you arrived in the snow.
Okay. Because I remember, yeah, in the snow. I remember you being excited for some reason about testing Doris. So you must have just gotten the new updated version and we're keen to play with it because you generously asked if I wanted to have an assessment. I was like, hell yeah, let's do this. And you asked me a question. You did the whole assessment. So you put on the little dots on my back of my pelvis and my
Yeah.
spine and hooked me up to the treadmill, got me to walk at my comfortable pace. And then we got the 3D x-ray scan video, the whole spiel with Doris, what you can get,
Yeah.
which seemed like a lot of data. Um, and then you said, did you crawl? And I was like, I had no idea at the time. I was like, I'm pretty sure I crawled. But you said, no, you should ask your parents. You should send them an email and we should find out because if you haven't crawled, then we have some stuff that we should do or something along those lines. So that night, I went back and emailed my mom and asked her, hey, it's a random question, but did I crawl? And she emails me back and says, well, I wasn't sure, so I went into my book and I had written notes from when you were young, and then I read that I wrote something like, didn't crawl, but squirmed like a seal on your stomach, and then you stood up at 11 months to walk. And I think you had said that 12 months is roughly no sooner than 12 months, really ideally. Would you like someone to stand up? So 11 months, that's pretty close, pretty good. But the not crawling thing was very interesting to you. And then I have a new data point, Helen, I don't think I've told you about. But it was maybe 2 years ago. I was having a random conversation with my mom in the kitchen. And she says, oh, yeah, and I remember when you were born and they pulled you out by your head. And I was like, Mom, you never told me this. He's like, yeah, you were induced. I'm like, what? I would have loved to
Oh,
know about this
wow.
back in 2019. That's just a
Oh, wow.
new extra bit of my movement development history that it could have been just, it could have prioritized some things for us at that time.
Y- y-
But the truth
Yeah.
comes out over time. So anyway, so I came back and told you that I hadn't crawled, and you got really excited and said, "Well, we should test your, I think, amphibian reflex and your Perez reflex because those are probably have never been stimulated correctly if you hadn't crawled." And you went about doing some interesting things where you grabbed my hip and kind of pulled me to see if my body responded, and you did this, asked me on my stomach to do the Perez reflex, which is an anterior tilt of the pelvis, which you would need to develop your spinal extension as an infant. And I couldn't organize that. And I got really excited about that. And for me, I'm the kind of person that if you said infant reflexes, I would have been like, oh, tell me more. Um, and I think I got really interested in understanding it all. And then you took me through, I think, I don't know how many hours it was, but it was at least 2 hours of going through movement with me to reorganize these early movement development patterns. And I gotta tell you, it was insane. It was really insane. I felt very different afterwards, and not just in my body, although I did feel very different in my body. But I don't know if I told you this part, but I remember going out into the world and I was walking around London, and I'm the kind of person that I'm quite introverted, and I won't go out of my way to talk to a stranger. I will wait for them to come to me, and even then I will like test them. Like, are you sure you want to talk to me? I'm pretty repulsive sometimes with my energy. Like so anyway, but then I had this urge to like, oh, I should go talk to some strangers, or I should go into this shop and like just talk to the owner. And I'm like, why? Why am I having these urges? But there was just this sense of inner confidence in my system that I wasn't rattled by
Wow.
strangers or going out and being extroverted. And I'm not going to say that now I'm an extrovert, but there was just like this subtle shift in how I felt energetically. And then learning about the role that these early movement patterns play in developing our nervous systems and our resiliency and our sense of confidence in ourselves. And it all kind of clicked to me in some level. And I just continued to explore that rabbit hole after that because of that experience with you. So I don't know where you want to go with that, but perhaps maybe for people who have never thought about their early development, there's probably a few threads you could pick up on there. Crawling, impact of not crawling. What's the impact on getting pulled out by your
Yeah.
head from the womb? And what does it do to the body? And how do you know? How do you know that this is something? What are some little clues that maybe if you're not making progress with your exercise programs and therapies, what's a clue that maybe looking into these early developmental movements is something useful?
Yeah. Thank you. Wonderful questions, all blurrily into one with no boundaries. Marvelous. So, and the where to start? So it is actually much easier than people think, because of course people are thinking that they've got to try and um, remember everything about their uh, childhood. I mean, you can't remember infanthood. We haven't even got a long-term memory at that stage. So we're reliant on the family stories that tend to pop out. You know, the very and I've apologized to my children many times because I was that mother. Oh no, my little Sammy, he was, walking at 9 months and all of this, and Joshy was whatever he was. So it is the if I could get across the message that what actually with our movement development, our initial movement development, we're looking ideal would be average. Just you want your little Johnny, you're looking for average
Oh, thank you for
because
saying that, Helen. I just got to interject and say my goal in life is just to be average. That's all I want. Just
the
mediocrity.
Well, because from that average, it offers that little developing person maximum movement potential. Because anything other than average is some kind of movement development glitch. All sort outable, but so much easier to sort out, so much easier if it didn't need to be sorted out. Because if you're needing to sort it out, probably there's been a hiccup along the line, and something needs help healing in some way. So I think of the as a prime example of this. So you look at Usain Bolt, and Usain Bolt's trademark is his Usain Bolt stance, where he draws his bow and he points it up to the sky, and it's always the same arm and leg that are straight and the same arm and leg that are bent, and it's always pointing in the same direction. And so this is, I don't know this because I've never tested Usain Bolt, but this pattern, because it's so spontaneous in his system, it's so easy for him to access. You think, oh, I wonder. So let's just take that shape and we'll put it into a footballer. And this footballer plays on the left side of the pitch. So, and the coach knows they are wicked on the left side of the pitch. If the guy doing his same job but on the right side was pulled a sickie or was injured or whatever, the coach knows that they wouldn't be able to put that person who was wicked on the left side, he wouldn't be able to put them on the right side, because that person has got that same shaping that Usain Bolt shows us, with a straight right arm, a straight right leg, a bent left arm pulling back, sitting in his left leg. And now I'm demoing, and we can see each other. And of course, this is radio, so I'm trying to make this so everybody just imagine that shape. But you're facing your goal, the goal that you want to shoot into, and you're on the left side of the pitch. That nothing is going to get past that right arm and that right leg. Nothing. Because that is a piece of movement development, well, I call it a piece of Lego, that is disorganized. So there is a level of automaticity to that outstretched arm and leg, rotation to the right, with the other side bent and like a stable stance, if you like. And that person has like a secret gift. It's a secret gift because it's so fast, it's so strong that nothing can blindside that right side, because it's organized with your senses. So that piece of movement patterning pops out with vibrations and sound and the eyes. So nothing can blindside that person from the right, but they can get blindsided from the left. They can. But if they're on the left side of the field, nothing's getting past that player. But they can only play in that position. But what happens if that player sprains his left ankle? Now his stance leg, the leg that is grounding him, whilst the right arm and the leg are out there doing all sorts of exciting footballing things, what happens now? Because he's stuck in that pattern, and that's his working leg. People think he's got two legs, he's running around. But the reality is there's a degree of restriction within his system that is invisible, but it is suggested in the shapes he makes continually, all of his unconscious postures. And then you dive back into their movement history, and oh yes, they were. I had one guy, he said, well, they told me I was born in Superman position. And you think, oh, okay. So these gifts that can make a youngster sort of in the world of movement, for instance, more advanced than their peers is a gift then, but it can become a curse if the gift is somehow injured to the extent that now you haven't got the gift anymore, if you see what I mean.
Yes, I want to interrupt and just say something clicked for me there. You know, when you've seen in practice, in clinic, someone who has your example of the soccer guy, football, soccer guy in that pattern he can't get out of, and he sprains his ankle. And now what does he do? He still has that reflexive, easy access to standing in that left leg. And you might ask, why isn't his ankle healing? Why is he stuck still? You know, when we look at an assessment, we look at where's the center of mass, which leg is this person favoring. And generally, if something's sore, you shift your weight off of it and you'd put more weight in the other leg to allow for the healing process, take the load off the tissues. But often you'll see people that are still standing on the side that hurts and they just can't unload
Yeah,
it. And you'd think
yeah,
if it was painful, you'd take your weight off of it.
yeah,
But some people
yeah,
can't. And this just made me think,
yes,
oh, that's a good indicator that maybe it's time to check in. Is there this reflex action at play?
yeah, yeah.
Sorry,
So,
continue.
no, perfect. That is it's a wonderful, uh, not interpretation of what I said. It's a wonderful pickup of a great example because when I'm here in clinic with the clients and I'm watching them, we haven't measured anything yet, and they sent me this history, and everything's on the right. Everything, all this pain is on the right, is on the right, is on the right, is on the right, and I'm thinking of a particular person because I'm watching them, not critically, I'm just observing and collecting information because how we stand in an unaware state. So when they're standing on Doris to be measured, of course, they're very aware. And I get pictures of perfect posture, what they think, what they ought to be showing me. But it doesn't matter because we're always going to be comparing like with like. And I've already seen them whilst they're chatting. I've already seen them making the shapes that they would habitually make. And this lady stood in tree pose on her right leg continually. So she would just, she'd move around and grab something from a bag and come back and stand next to me and stick her left leg without assistance from her hands right up above her knee on the inside of her right leg, shoving her right hip right out. So her foot was on the midline. So from the ground, the right foot on the ground all the way up to the hip is making like one half of a V. And of course, her right ankle is sore, and her right knee, and her right hip, and her right lower back, and something underneath her right shoulder blade. And I'm watching all of this. And then I say, okay, for Doris, I want to collect the data. So I want you to stand in your default posture, the posture that you just sort of adopt without even thinking about it. And she's standing there and she doesn't know what it is. She's like got a big puzzled look. Well, I don't know. I think I stand in my 2 feet. I think I stand like this. And I said, okay, well, what I've seen is you standing like this, and I can't do tree pose. So I fall over in trying to demonstrate tree pose. And her eyes fell out of her head and she said, oh my God, I do, don't I? I had no idea, but I know I do, but I had no idea. And that's the thing. You have no idea. So she'd listed all of her pains. She knew where they were on the right. And I said, do you ever stand in tree pose on your left? She said, no, couldn't possibly. I'd fall over. So she was where she could only be. And that's the massive clue. Because every side of the truth, if we think of truth, that logic, science, imagination, intuition. So the logic and the science would say, well, if she could, she'd be in her left, away from the pain. But she is clearly showing us that she can't be in her left because she'll fall over. And she's in her right because it's what she does effortlessly. She is effortlessly there, even though it hurts. And then you think, okay, so quite possibly the wiring of her movement development is set up for her to be effortlessly there. And now the right leg is right fed up and wants a holiday, and it wants the left leg to get involved. Please, thank you very much. Let's get the brain's awareness of left. Why doesn't it know left? Why does it have to stay right? We've got the clue. The clue must be somewhere in the brain. We need to go rifling around in the filing cabinet of the brain to try and see, is this an element of movement development? Is it a movement patterning that is a bit of a mess? And that's all it is. It's a bit disorganized, and it's organizable, which is the joy. Everything is organizable. They know this, that the brain scientists tell us the sky is the limit. So if the sky is the limit, why aren't we holding back using this information that they are there teaching us?
So what is the difference then? So let's say someone has this disorganization, discombobulation that is from an early age, they started this pattern. Why is it a different than, like, why wouldn't just stretching it help? What's the difference between going about reorganizing one of these more early development reflexive patterns versus, well, my right hip, that lady, like her right tree pose thing was really effortless. Why
Yeah.
not just work on her other tree pose? What's the difference between just doing some kind of stretching or balancing out the muscle strength? A lot of people will say, oh, I'm just weak on this side. I have a client who always says, well, my left hip's just weak. Shouldn't I just be strengthening my left hip? But he has zero ability to even stand on his left leg. So in that case, will strengthening give you access to standing on your left leg, or do you need to work on something more fundamental, like accessing the mechanics of standing on your left leg before strengthening it? Do you know what I mean? Like, what's the difference
Yeah.
between going about working on these patterns versus just conventional, how we think about strengthening and exercise and stretches?
Yeah. Oh, and that's another very juicy question. So the reality is, it could be movement development, and stretching could help, which is really interesting. But it has to be a very particular stretch. So what the brain scientists have told us is that there is a route for rewiring in the brain. It's called the indirect pathway, which is it's a bit of a mad, I remember the term, because it's like, well, that's mad, because that's the direct way. That's like switching a switch in the brain. That's the direct way, surely, rather than invite the brain to do something else. We're using the indirect pathway, which is actually a very cool, okay, do this now. Don't do the other, do this. But it needs to be an eccentric loading. Now, people say eccentric, and I was corrected by somebody who knows about these things. And ever since then, I've said eccentric because I got corrected by the man who knows these things. And every time I say it, I have to explain that I'm saying it apparently correctly, even though everybody thinks that it should be eccentric.
Ah,
So
I
I think I'm
understand. It's
quite,
like when I learned it was not a cement truck, it's a concrete truck. Because what's in the truck is actually concrete, not cement. So now I have to say concrete truck and then explain why.
yeah, it's very, yeah, that, because I would be the same. I'd be questioning what's a concrete truck? It's a cement truck. I understand the cement truck. I don't understand the concrete. Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? So I have these extra conversations in trying to be correct. I then double the length of time it takes to say anything. So I'm so glad you have the
Anyway.
same problem as me. So anyway, so if you eccentrically load, so which is stretching under load, so that it's lengthening, but whilst being loaded, if it's to do with, and you do it often enough, because then you are modulating that concentric contraction. So if the muscle fibers are coming together, and from one end of the muscle to the other is getting shorter, that's your concentric contraction. But if the muscle fibers are coming together, but the ends of the muscle are going away from themselves, then we've got the muscle work, but at a longer length. And when I learned that in class, I think, well, I understand that's pretty cool. So so if you imagine a bodybuilder with an epically short bicep and he goes around with his arms bent the whole time because his biceps are so short. If he spent a period of time eccentrically loading that bicep, so never constant, never bicep curling, only bicep lowering, and then somebody would have to give him the weight, or he'd have to pick it up with the other hand and then give it to that hand to then lower again, then it would modulate or calm the ridiculously short muscular contraction that the muscle was living in. And does that make sense?
Yep. Yep.
So and then you think, well, okay, so then I can see that if somebody was stretching under load, so not just stretching under load, often enough, and apparently the brain scientists tell us we need a 5-second hook. So it can't just be, wallop it down and that's it. It's got to be slow for the brain to cotton on to what's going on. And you do it often enough, then that swathe of tissue will then start to operate from a starting position of longer. So, so stretching can work, even if it's movement development, but it kind of depends. And of course, stretching works for many people, but then it probably wasn't, if it's passive stretching or, a stretch that is like a long sit hamstring stretch, just something like that, where it's not loaded. And if that helps, then probably the original problem wasn't anything to do with wiring in the brain. It was something to do with, for some reason, that muscle just didn't have enough space or attention, and continually stretching it made it feel better. Great, wonderful. So every single modality that exists on the planet today is right. I think every single modality is right and incomplete. Every single one. Nothing is complete because we don't know everything yet. So it's impossible for there to be an answer.
Yeah.
It cannot be that there is one way to fix things because we don't know everything yet. So that everybody's right and incomplete, and all the different modalities put boundaries around themselves, and there's a limitation by the very nature of the boundary of that particular modality. But of course, if they didn't have boundaries, it would be very difficult to learn. And we wouldn't really know what we were learning because we put a skin around it and called it this, and the box contains that, and that's what you're going to learn. And I think that, and we know that chunking down information is a good way of learning. Unfortunately, the chunks are getting ever smaller. I refer to my Insta analytics, which tell me 23 seconds. And there's not an awful lot you can cram into 23 seconds that's going to be terribly helpful. So we have this, what seems to be an ever decreasing attention span, where things have to be chunked down into ever teeny tinier. So it's not chunks now, it's a nibble. So, and then we got to put the nibbles back together again. So before we had to put the chunks, we had to feed the chunks together to create a better picture, a more whole picture. And now the attention span is so small, we're having all these nibbles, and we've got to get the nibbles together. It's all doable. So we've got to put the nibbles together into chunks, and then the chunks into bigger pictures, and just make for better thinking. And now I've forgotten the original beginning of the question, because we've drilled right down. We've gone micro, and we need to go meta.
We need to go meta. We need to go macro again. So maybe something that you can come back to is if someone's listening to this and they're a little curious, but they're not sure, should I just do yoga, or maybe I should talk to someone about my movement development? How might someone know if they are a person who would benefit from it? What are some of the tells? for me, you picked up on something in my walking, and you picked
Yeah.
up on something that made you want to ask about if I crawled, and maybe you can talk about what that might have been that you saw, and then what would be the impact of something like missing an entire developmental stage of crawling.
Well, the first thing to say is you are clearly still a highly functional human being. So, to a
Well, that's
great
debatable,
extent,
but
does it matter? And it only matters if you're getting frustrated, you're not able to do what you want to do, or you're not getting to where you want to be. Um, and in terms of movement, just to answer that very first bit, in terms of movement, I think all movement, all movement's wonderful. You want to do the movement, you crack on and do the movement. If you are drawn to yoga, do yoga. Your body will tell you if it's enjoying it. And if it's not enjoying it, if it's not enjoying elements of it, then your body is telling you, well, I like this and this and this, but I don't like that. And then you can ask why. You can wonder why. If you don't like yoga at all, then that's just, that's not for you. So find something else. So your gut instinct. So lots of people, they start something and they continue even though they don't like it for some reason, because there's some element of, well, if I don't continue, I failed. It's like people talking to me about not walking on a run, because if they take a few walking steps, somehow they failed, and it just absolutely makes no sense to me because it's just a different gear. And if your body wants you to walk for a few steps, then when you go back to running, you're going to feel better than you did before because you were healing as you were walking. And the scientists have caught up with what the ultra distance runners have known forever, that just because you need to walk doesn't mean to say that's it, the running is over. You walk for a bit and you go back to the running and you feel fresh, because we are literally healing and recovering as we are still putting one foot in front of the other. It's just less stressful than running, but it's slower, so it's less efficient. So there's a balance as we ambulate on 2 feet at whatever speed. There's a balance between the amount of work that's being expended, the energy that's being expended, for you to be able to go further or faster. So that the gear is according to how far you need to go or how fast you need to go. So there's an element in this modern day world that we live in where people feel as if they need to continue, even if, number one, they're not enjoying it, and number two, they are, and it's hurting. And you think, okay, just listen. The body is just giving you messages, and they'll be helpful. And then you can couple that with the instant thought of, is there a family story about my movement development? Is there, oh, you sat on your ass and you were just the best baby ever because you just sat there smiling and gurgling very happily until you're about 15 months old, and then that was it. You were off. So you were just the best because because it's hard work having little ones, and if they're every which way, it's knackering. But if they're sat there good as gold, it's a lot easier. But then the question is why? Why we are movement. Our reflexes, our initial reflexes, drive the movement. So if a baby is not moving, why? Why isn't the baby moving? The baby should be moving. We think of so often we come from the story from the position of evolution, and we would have had to run for dinner. We go to get running, you're hunting and running and tracking and walking and racing away from saber-toothed tiger, and then carrying dinner home and all this kind of thing. So we have all of this amazing body to go run for dinner. And then I look at it, I think slightly differently. I think our movement patterning, given the embryonic folds create the little pockets for our amazing organs, and I think they're all vital. I don't distinguish between vital and non-vital because I think I want to keep them all. So all of my embryonic folds, when I was a pancake, so I started out life as as a fertilized egg, which then flattened out to a pancake and then folded into various tubes. And then I became the most amazing origami. And then I became me. And it's all an amazing miracle. But that initial folding and then origami created these pockets for my organs, and the ability to move, I think, to keep the organs healthy. Because without the healthy organs, I'm dead. So all of our movement isn't to go catch dinner. The movement enables us to catch dinner, but great movement begets great happy organs that keep me healthy long enough to procreate, is the survival theory. So if the family story is I sat on my ass and was just gurgled beautifully, then, oh, okay, well, what was missing? What in your movement development, your reflexive, don't forget, a reflex is movement that happens, it's triggered either with a stroke or with traction. The reaction is somewhere between 180 and 270 miles an hour. It is done to you, for your benefit. Now, when you're 12, maybe, you really don't want that toe just pinging up every time you load your foot and you have traction through the length of your foot, and your big toe going through your socks with monotonous regularity. We don't want that then. But initially, we absolutely categorically wanted it, because that's the beginnings of our foot function and our propulsion. And our body, our foot can morph fantastically quickly from this load-bearing, lengthened, relaxed state into the rigid lever to send us on our way. So we want to know why the reflexes haven't emerged in an organized way to make that baby be able to move. So we're driven by curiosity. So why is nothing going on? Why isn't anything going into their mouths? Everything should be going into their mouths. That's how they explore, including their feet. And then that's another story. Baby grows in my little utopian world. Baby grows wouldn't exist. There would be no bodysuit with feet on it as well, because the feet, they need to be free to pass in front of the baby's face, and for the baby to, occasionally every now and again catch it, wonder what it is, and put it in its mouth, which starts the sense of, oh, it belongs to me. But they don't think that initially, of course. They just giggle delightedly because something is moving in their mouth, because, of course, their mouthing is triggering the reflexes that create the movement for the rather important foot mechanics, the initial movement. So if in your movement development history, you either sat on your ass for longer than is normal for it to become a story, or you got on your feet earlier than normal for it to become a story, then I would start investigating movement development, because probably you are operating, fully functioning, but not as easily as you could. So then I'll go on to a story where this lovely lady came in. She loved her running, but she said, it's like I am dragging my legs along with me. I want to go for a run, but my legs don't want to. And she moved in such a way that I thought, oh, and this is the same as you. And I don't call it the amphibian reflex anymore, because people will go home and they will Google the amphibian reflex and they will see pictures of babies. And then even if I had them interested and engaged and feeling the difference, seeing the measurements, sensing within themselves, I'm measuring them better, they're going faster for less effort, whether they're walking or they're running, then as soon as they see a picture of a baby, I've lost it all. And they've switched off and they don't want to know. And I need them to continue doing the movement pattern for months and months and months to get it organized. It's not difficult and it doesn't take long. In fact, it's super easy because don't forget, a baby can do this. None of this stuff is difficult. A baby can do this. But you just need to do it regularly. So anyway, she comes in, tells me that she loves her running, but her legs don't want to come. And she moved in a way, and there are two really strong telltale signs. Some people have both, some have one or t'other. So it is a waddle. So the movement, they're putting one foot in front of the other, yes, but they're swaying from side to side. Sometimes it's really exaggerated. Sometimes it's asymmetrical. They'll sway one side and come into the middle. Sway one side, come into the middle. Now, it seems difficult for people to see this until I point it out on the computer. Then they see it. But if they're here with their partner, very often the partner will say, "Oh yes, you've walked like that forever." And the partner is mortified because they didn't know they walked like that, and it's really obvious to them now. They say, "Why didn't you tell me?" And he said, "Well, I love you anyway." And we have these kind of conversations where there's this big reveal. So there's a swaying motion. And the problem is the swaying motion has got a label attached to it, which is a bit of a disaster. Because then you'll have people, so I have Trendelenburg syndrome. And you think, what? No, you don't. Your lifelong reflex of locomotion is fast asleep. That's all it is. And it is this description of a movement pattern that now has something really rather scary because Mr. Trendelenburg put his name to it and made it into a problem. And, it depends why the person moves like that. But if the person has a backstory and we see this movement patterning and we then test it and the hips are really heavy and the leg doesn't flip over as light as a feather, then we can hypothesize that perhaps the lifelong reflexive locomotion is still in degrees of a coma, and we can wake it up instantly. So the answer is there instantly. You just got to know what to do. The other sign that is there is they'll walk without their arms moving. So they'll walk, their arms might swing, and they'll think, yes, I swing my arms, but it'll be only from the elbow. So the shoulders don't move even a teeny tiny bit forward and back. So we're not talking, oh, well, that's not quite enough for that speed you're going at. It's as if there is an invisible brick wall when the elbow comes in underneath the shoulder joint, underneath the head of the humerus, the elbow stops and then the arm carries on. So the arms they either don't move or they don't flex at the shoulder. There's only flexion at the elbow. Coupled with, because nothing means anything by itself, coupled with a backstory and coupled with, what would be another sign? It tends to come with hip pain. Hips will be the most bothered because you're swaying with your whole body weight traveling over in a very unhelpful kind of a way. And the upper body isn't helping where the arms are moving not at all or only from the elbow down to the hand. The torso stays, I call it a sack of potatoes on the pelvis. So the torso just looks heavy. They might be slight, but effectively, because the upper body isn't moving, there's no dynamism to it. There's no lift off of the pelvis. So the legs are doing all of the work. So these signs are there not for us to know. The signs are there for us to dive deeper and to explore, to see, well, I wonder if this is movement development, because if it is, let's get excited because that's easy.
Yeah.
And we might need to overlay that with some very clever joint mechanics stuff, which is always very good fun. But we can't build joint mechanics on top of a fundamental movement pattern that's a mess, where movement doesn't even exist yet.
Yeah.
Anyway, we wake up this lady's lifelong reflexes of locomotion, and she sends me a text the next day. Oh my God, I went for a run. The very first time my legs have willingly come with me.
Aw.
And it's that easy. It can be that easy. I mean, obviously, we'd want every case to be that cut and dried, and bodies are so complex. We don't understand them yet, and there are other elements, and of course, life and injuries, and. But there are some really easy patterns. So that's one of them. So you can just get somebody to film you, and just if you're not quite sure what you look like, just walk away from the camera, not too far because you become a speck in the distance and you can't see anyway. But just walk away from the camera, walk across the camera, check with your partner. Is that what you see? I felt a bit funny because everybody self-doubts. But actually what I see, so I've had pro athletes, they'll walk on the treadmill and then they'll get off and they said, no, no, it didn't feel like me. I say, don't worry, do it again. And I will measure and see exactly the same. Exactly the same, because we move in the only way that we can move. Our setup, our patterning is like this, and there is neurologically. They say that walking is neurologically the most complex thing we do. So we can build a robot that can somersault like a human and play pool like a human and run like a human, but it will look robotic when it walks because they still haven't figured it out yet. Apparently. So there are all these micro moments that we can't micromanage. You can break it down to every nano moment. We can't micromanage it. So whilst people can, aim to place their big toe, and please, I have a horror of people aiming to place their big toe. It messes with the timing of just about everything. And so you can manage a body part, but then you can't manage all the body parts. So we simply end up walking in the only way we can walk. That's just how we're set up. It's a movement pattern. And there's a shed load of stuff happening in the 0.7 of a second that one foot is in contact with the ground. So you can't people worry that that's not what they do, and it'll probably be what they do, and all you need to do is film again. And the other one, the obvious one is holy socks, very, very rigid feet, or very, very loose feet, so the extremes, and the sense of hypersensitivity in feet, as in, oh, don't touch my feet. Oh, no, don't touch my feet. Oh, God, don't. The worst thing in the world would be a pedicure, because they can't possibly have anybody touching their feet. And then you think, well, you want to bounce around on them. You want to go places on them. How can it possibly be logically right that your feet are so sensitive that you can't have anybody touch them? And an extreme of that is a child who just hates that parents can't get the socks on to go to school. And so that tells a story. So either the person who can walk on hot coals is one end of the spectrum and nothing bothers them. They can bounce around on spiky things and nothing bothers them, all the way through to, the other end of the spectrum is the hypersensitivity, and they're like Princess and a Pea, and just even the slightest grain of speck of anything and they're ouchy, and we want to be in the middle, average. We
So
want to be
anyone who's gone
average.
to a Tony Robbins event and walked on hot coals, we should be suspicious.
Oh my goodness, did they do that?
I think
Oh,
so. Yeah, it's rite of
well,
passage
of
there.
course. there are no absolutes in movement, and we are multifactorial, and I would I would be interested for those who did do it, because they won't all have done it.
Mm.
Those that did do it, whether or not they had hyposensitive feet as opposed to hypersensitive feet.
And
It would just be interesting.
and what reflex, or should we say movement development pattern, should we be interested in looking at if someone has hyposensitive feet? Just to take this example a little further, would that be? I know there's a number of foot patterns that you can check for.
Well, in actual fact, it's you would stroke the foot in the same way.
Mm.
So the easy way is you kind of you go in a kind of a circle. So it's from the heel up the outside to the pinky, across where the toes meet the foot, across from the pinky to the big toe, or vice versa, and then down from the ball of the foot to the inside of the arch. So basically, you can just kind of stroke a fingernail or a pen around the outside edges of your foot. And somebody hypersensitive, and you got to be kind because there is a nociceptive withdrawal. So, if you're poking the foot and the foot withdraws, that doesn't mean anything. That just means you were poking and you were being mean. So, it's just a gentle stroke with a fingernail or a tip of a not sharp pen. And is there a response? The correct answer is nothing. There's nothing is the correct answer. A beautiful, average, beautiful foot, which has maximum movement potential. Nothing happens. So there's no quiver of a quiver of a toe. There's no sense of a frisson of excitement, and definitely no recoil. If the foot's recoiling, then that's a hypersensitive, and then the hyposensitive, nothing will happen. So which would be the correct answer? Nothing is happening, but you're suspicious. You're suspicious. So then, and the foot tends to be rigid. That's a tendency, and I check it in both. But if you go up, if you push your thumb up in the center of the metatarsal arch, sort of underneath met heads 2 and 3 kind of thing. If you push up, the bone should kind of fold around your thumb. You're pushing up from the sole, and it's just there because you just have nice soft give. But very often it'll be rigid and it won't move. Nope, no movement, nothing is happening here. And then finally with the hypo, if I'm thinking, oh, I don't know, I think this is hypo. They are thudding around like an elephant. They don't seem to have any sense there, no sense, no feeling. And so I will ask them, so they can't see where my finger is, and their foot is tilted away, so their knee is away from the midline. And I'll say, bring your knee to the midline, and then pull off as soon as the ball of your foot touches my finger. And I have one guy who went barefoot running, literally barefoot running on the coastal path of Cornwall. He, bless him, I had to ask him to get his foot off my finger because I thought he was going to break it. And he had no idea my finger was there.
Oh my God.
So he could do crazy things for sure, but it was to the detriment of him because there was no response from his feet. Yeah, so it's always quite interesting. You just get creative about finding ways to see when your intuition's it's telling you, oh, I think this isn't an injury, this isn't a joint mechanics thing. I think this is an underlying innate movement pattern that's disorganized, and this foot is not sending the right response throughout the body because there is no response, if you like.
Yeah. I want to take a hard tangent, if that's okay. Not really a hard
You go,
time.
yeah, go ahead. I don't know where I was anyway, so carry on.
I'm just thinking about things like ADHD, which we're seeing a lot more people identifying whether it's real or whether, like real as in there are very clear symptoms that benefit from medication, or there are just people that are identifying with the characteristics of ADHD. And I know that there is a link between some neuroatypicalness and specific developmental movement patterns that may not have been correctly wired. And oh man, I know you'll have thoughts on this, I'm sure. I had a client, just to set up my question, but I had a client who was very severe ADHD, and he was an adult in his 20s. And I remember when we were learning the dynamic and postural reflexes in the MNRI course, and there's all these correlations between, because they're working with children, between you might see these psychological characteristics with these specific movement patterns related to these specific reflexes. And I gotta tell you, he was like textbook. One of the reflexes we, I think, correlate with ADHD type characteristics are the spinal galant, I remember, as one, and ATNR being another. And I know it's not always, it's not always so cut and dry and black and white. But I remember seeing that, and like you said, I had a bit of an intuition about, oh, I wonder, his ADD is intense. Like, would show up to a session 40 minutes late consistently because he had been sucked into stuff in his life that became consuming and just couldn't organize. And yeah, it was very, very intense. and and I just remember he was so open, and he wanted to explore movement. And in general, exploring movement is great, regardless of what it is. If you have a bit of a neurodivergent whatever you have going on, it can be very, very grounding to get into your body. But because I had just started learning these movement patterns and was really enthusiastic about it, we decided to go down the rabbit hole of, well, let's see if these specific, like you said, it has to be specific, these specific movements, let's see what this does. And not only for his body, but let's see how it just evolves in his, how his personality, not personality, that's not the right word, but how his demeanor, how his ability to focus, how all of these psychological characteristics. Let's just watch and see if anything unfolds from this. And I gotta say, over the course of, we worked together for years, and he was very consistent with me for years. And I gotta say, he changed so much, not just his body and his movements, but his ability to be present with me was so different, and his ability just to kind of tidy up parts of his life that he was neglecting, just and those things might have happened anyway. We don't know, because we don't have the story of, had he not decided to commit to moving his body differently. And people, well, yeah, I just can't say. But I thought it was just the change in him from the start of a session to the end of a session. He'd come in all frazzled and ADD, and he'd leave a little bit more calm. And
Yeah.
on that level, on that micro level, it was happening in a session. Then on the macro level of unfolding over the years, it seemed to do something. And I, obviously, that's one case, and it's not. I don't want to get in trouble and say that this is going to cure symptoms of anything. But I wonder if you have any connections you've seen, and could it be that people might be able to support themselves if they do identify with any neuroatypical type thing? They can support themselves with movement, and what role do these developmental movements have in developing the brain and the nervous system? It's a big question, but
Oh, well, I
any
think that
thoughts?
it was an easy answer. They have everything to do with developing the brain and developing the, I mean, so we might think that, the reflex that is called the Babinski is there to ping a big toe up and create movement in the foot, and it is. But its organization enables us to be grounded, literally and figuratively. So I have learned from quite a few teachers in this field now. And we don't have, in our development, we don't have things for, so let me explain with an example. So I will suspect, I'll think, oh, I think this person, I think the problem is grip. I think the grip is off. And I'll do the test and their grip will tighten on an object. And I think, tick, correct answer. And then I'll eyeball them. As I do the test, I'll be eyeballing them. And then I'll do the test and that the grip should let go. And it tightens again. And I say, oh, you can't let go. And their eyes will pop out of their heads because they know on every level they cannot let go. So I see our movement development giving us these elements, both literally and figuratively. So they build elements of our movement of body and thought. And I can't separate them. Movement of body and thought. Our movement patterning and our brain movement characteristics, our isms, our personality, if you like, but our characteristics, they're rooted in the same place. So if you have a movement, a visible movement development thing that's a bit off, that partner within the characteristics of yourself, your character, will also be in a bit of a muddle. It'll be equally as in a bit of a muddle. And so you organize the both. So for me, maybe I'm too meta and it's overly simplified, but until they understand it all, I'll stick with the meta because it's so powerful, as you have experienced. And there are scientists out there. So there's Dr. Robert Melillo, who is one big voice, and Dr. Robin Pauk and Dr. Melvin Kaplan, who are all saying, whoa, these labels, it is, once again, we have, it's Trendelenburg syndrome. No, it's not. It's ADHD. Well, actually, no, it's actually part of the patterning in your the left hemisphere speaking to the right side flexion of your spine, which is very agitated, and you can't sit still, and you're going to fidget, and you can't bear a belt, and you want to have really loose clothes, and actually you want to take all your clothes off and be naked because it's really bothering you. It's the same thing. It is the extremes of these. It's degrees of how disorganized the movement patterning is, which then leads to these behaviors that the behaviors are the same as a big toe pinging up and making a hole in the sock. The behavior is they can't sit still. They can't sit upright in their chair because then the chair is touching the back of their waist and it's bothering them, like really bothering them. Or one of them, every time they lean forward, their legs want to, so they're going forward. So I have to think which way around it is. So when they lean forward over their chair, of their table with their arm outstretched, their legs want to flex underneath them. Or if they lean back, their legs want to extend, and they get told off by the teacher for not sitting still. So in the end, they'll sit on their feet or they'll wrap their feet around the chair legs. And it's not for stability. It's to keep them still so that the teacher stops telling them off. And all of these are movement patterning disturbances, which are not only creating the physical movement pattern disturbances, but also are developing within the brain whatever they are connected to. So the one I was just referring to is strongly connected to convergent vision and divergent vision, to the connection between the visual processing and spinal extension and flexion, and the use of the arms.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. And they all, and there's never one piece of Lego, I call it, or one movement development element, sort of solo on its own. But you don't have to sort them all out. You sort one or two out, and the others seem to come on board. But just to offer another example of an extreme, Melvin Kaplan, in his book, Seeing Through New Eyes, it's only through the work that these amazing people have done with prisms. So Martha Beck, the what would Martha Beck be called? She's written lots of books about anxiety and self-help for psychology stuff, psychotherapy kind of stuff, and she says, if change is the goal, bewilderment is the method. So, and it plays into what Melvin Kaplan has been doing, and a few others, obviously, but he's written the book. And what they discovered was they put prism glasses on and on normal people who had normal vision, and it turned the world upside down. Within 2 hours, these people were going about their day, busy shopping in the supermarket, going on the tube, going on the train, with the world upside down. Their brain had figured it out, and they were able to move through the world happily with it upside down within several hours.
We're so adaptable.
Yeah. So, which gives us, if it's something to do with the brain, gosh, people, if they realized that they didn't have to do the elbow stuff, and actually all they needed to do was the movement development of the hand stuff that then creates the happy elbow, it's so much easier because you're not really doing the hand, you're speaking to the brain. And the brain is so super adaptable, and instantly with timing, we can make timing improvements instantly because we're talking to 34 billion neurons.
Mm.
And they go, oh, you want timing changes, do you? Okay, you can have them instantly. Takes seconds. Anyway, so Kaplan had these autistic people. There's a case study. He was 41 years old, and they only know this after the event. So this chap is 41 years old. He's been labeled as autistic. He moves in an awkward way, and he thinks that a car is, I think it was, I might not be exactly right, but there was a wing mirror, a passenger door, a wheel, and a bonnet. Or it could have been a trunk, don't know. But anyway, there were these body parts of a car that he thought was a car. And they worked with these prisms, so they bewildered the brain. They made the brain have to move, so that the person is moving, but the world is being made crazy with these prism glasses for 20 minutes. And then he takes the glasses off, and he sees a whole car.
Wow.
And he had no idea that these elements of the car were joined up. And they only knew this, they only understood what he was seeing after the event when they had solved the problem. And they're seeing, how you see neurodiverse, neuroatypical, whatever label is being offered, and they might be walking a bit jerkily or walking with their hand running along the wall. They're walking jerkily and with their hand running on the wall because for them, the wall is moving and the floor is moving. And we would all walk a bit funny if the floor was moving and the wall was moving. And they work with the prisms, and then the wall is not moving and the floor is not moving, and they walk normally. And so now the label doesn't apply.
Yeah. Interesting.
So we just speak to the brain. What is missing? Who is in charge here? Who is in charge of this particular arena of our movement and our thinking? Let's speak to that. Let's speak to the governor in charge of that bit. And we seem to, well, we, the royal we, these amazing scientists are teaching us that we should expect a lot. The brain is so soft wired, so neuroplastic. The cerebellums make new brain cells. So the thought that we might run out of brain cells has been proven to be not true. So we make new neurons. So really, I can sit here and think I want to believe the brain scientists when they tell us that the sky is the limit.
Yeah.
I'll go along with that because people say you shouldn't give hope. Well, that's a bit sad, isn't it?
Yeah,
We
fuck
might as
them.
well, yeah. Well, we might as well all just go back to bed then. What
Well,
do you
it
mean you
it
shouldn't
reminds
offer
me
hope?
what you said in the beginning of our talk was that the body is so resilient, and that's one of your sounds like one of your core premises for how you go about working. Like a change can happen at any stage, and it made me think about the wonderful how beautiful it is to be able to work with both this soft wiring and hard wiring. The idea that we have these reflexive, developmental, lifelong movement patterns that can be wired so quickly, but then also having the tool of working with the adult, upright, closed chain joint mechanics, those two marry together so well. Because you could conceive of how, at an early stage in life, how we're moving reflexively with our squishy little bodies, that will shape our bones, that will shape
Yeah,
our joint surfaces. You know, Wolff's Law, whatever forces we apply to
yeah,
bone, it will create the modeling of that bone. And someone might be not able to access a movement of their hips, which might shape how their actual bony structure of their hips development. And you could say to that person, oh, there's no hope because that's just how you are now. But then even within that shape that they've developed through these perhaps less than average developmental movements, there's still so much potential within that limitation of what they have now. And that limitation might have set them on a trajectory of what they enjoy doing with their body that brings them a lot of joy. You know, like a ballet dancer who somehow has these massively externally rotated, retroverted acetabulums that allows them to do some beautiful dance movements. I mean, that's a limitation for other things, but it opens them up to doing something really specific and wonderful. Um, I don't know where I was going with that necessarily, but it is cool to
makes me
have that
think
bigger
it's
picture of just how to look at someone's development, seeing those two parts of
and
it.
and there's nothing wrong with anything unless the
No.
person wants to change. So
Yeah.
it is a gift. So if you're wiring, your soft wiring, your hard wiring, whatever, um if you are so I always think that you're not good at the sport you chose. Your organization chose your sport because you were already good at it. The very
Hmm.
first time you did it, you were already good.
Yeah.
And because you were already good, you enjoyed it and you did more.
Yes.
So the obvious one, which I see a lot, is with the equestrians.
Mm.
So they have a very static upper body that can stay upright and not slump on the horse, and their arms stay very still. So they don't have their lifelong reflex of locomotion.
Mm.
So putting one foot in front of the other is slightly more challenging. But the horse is doing that. They have to sit beautifully
Right.
without their upper body moving and without their arms moving much, and they're already good at it.
Mm.
So and that is so but then by the time you reach them as an adult, they have the skill, and now you can offer them the movement patterning that they were missing, and they'll still be good on a horse because their skill set has been developed since they were a child, already good before their classmates, where they were still struggling and not being shouted at by the teacher for not slumping on the saddle and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it is, you don't lose the skill that maybe something that was disorganized led you to. So
Mm.
the ballet dancer whose spinal parese didn't emerge properly, kept them in posterior tilt with no lumbar lordosis, creates for a magnificently stable, on pointy kind of a maneuvering, looking very beautiful, walking with big external rotations.
Mhm.
But they will still, if you organize that spinal press, if you organize that, which is now, because the hips are now tired in that position, and maybe parts of the joint that maybe haven't been used quite as much are open to a little bit more choice now, and you can help the brain organize towards better movement, but they'd still be lovely at ballet and they'd still be brilliant at it because they've already got the skill.
Yeah, it's not going
Yeah.
to take anything away from their abilities. It'll
No,
just open up
no, it's
more
only going to add.
potential. Yep, yep.
Yeah, it will only add.
Well, and you could see it going the opposite way too, that you might be a masochistic individual and you just want to challenge yourself, so you seek out the activities that are exactly what your body can't do because there's maybe a part of you that wants to get that back, but you're trying to do it in a way that's just a bit too unmanageable.
That's dark.
Yeah, right. Well, I can relate to that. I'm a
I live
little
in the
dark, so.
light. Yes, I prefer to stick with light and joyful and hope
Well, no, just to like for me, oh
and
man, this
no
is
pain.
exposing all my psychological traumas. But I went through a phase where I was forcing myself to do yoga, even though it was so painful, it made me cry. But I was like, no, I have to do this. I need this because I can't do it.
Oh.
But like forward flexion, like bending forward to touch my toes, literally was so gnarly that I cried every time I did it. But I was like, no, just power through. You need this. And now I've softened up a little bit and I don't feel the need to force myself to do things my body literally can't accomplish. But I bet there's a demographic that's listening that resonates with that too.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, and they frequently come through the door of the clinic as well, and are, degrees of slightly broken, not permanently, obviously, but in trouble, but they can't stop.
Yep.
And
Yep.
and that's a challenge. And patience is definitely required. But it does remind me of dive in. So one of the drills in my book is there because of you. And I've told you this story before, but it was that moment in class when you had revealed that you were able to forward bend and lengthen your hammy proximally for the first time, like ever. And and I've got the opposite problem to you. So I've got a hyperlordosis
Mm.
with a massive anterior tilt. And I could never get a distal length through my hammy.
Mm.
And so I adopted the wonderful transverse plane movement when we're rotating towards the supinating, straightening leg, but you're diving in as well. And that made it into the book because that was just such a glorious way for me to find length in my hammy for the first time, the whole of my hammy for the first time. Well, yeah, ever.
Mm. Oh, that's awesome. So,
Yeah. And that
yeah.
was yours.
Oh, where's my
Do you
royalties,
remember
Helen?
it?
I do.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So I think you shared that. I'm not sure if you shared it in class or
Well, I don't know if we
Gary.
ever were in the same class together.
No, but I wonder if Gary was explaining to us about you, or we had a conversation after the event. I can't remember now, but it was genius.
Ah, well, I'm glad it helped one other person.
Yeah. Oh no, it actually became a what I call a spark plug. So on ultras, when you're running for a very, very long way, you need easy ways that feel really good, that open out very tired areas to almost give you a new lease of life. And I've got pictures of me and teammates out, on adventures, all doing this transverse plane dive in all together in sync.
Oh, that's
Marvelous.
awesome. Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I'll have to dig out a
Wow.
picture and send it to you.
Well,
Fantastic.
people should check out your book then. And maybe, well, we've been talking for a while, and I reckon this is a good place to stop for now. And maybe can you tell people where should they look you up if they want to learn more? And what's the name of your book? And um, yeah, yeah, where can people find you, Helen, if they want to read more about what it is you do or watch some videos?
Thank you.
See the
Oh,
dive
thank
in,
you.
transverse plane dive in.
Yeah. So, well, I wrote the book Even with Your Shoes On, um, which is it doesn't really help, does it? So, Even with the shoes on is finding your natural path to smooth, comfortable, in joyous running. So it's not a way to run; it is finding your best way. It's sleuthing where your body isn't able to move well and finding ways to move it well. And movement development isn't included in it. And I recently had to re-record the Audible. So it was already recorded and
Oh,
something happened to the files and we had to do it again.
oh
So 7 years
no.
later, I read the book again. So it's a big book. So that was quite the job. But what was absolutely wonderful for me was in rereading the book 7.5 years later, there's only two words I'd have changed. If I
Mm.
rewrite only two words. And the two words were because I was inferring, I was talking about what we've spent these delicious couple of hours. Thank you so much. I feel so much better. Um, I was not full disclosure, but I was feeling, as you know, I was feeling pretty rubbish, and I'm having had
Yeah.
not a good day. But now I feel great, so thank you for that.
Aw.
So the I reference reflexive health and say, because I thought, well, I don't know if the world's quite ready for what I'm saying about in this book anyway. So I'm not going to dive down the movement development bit as well. And at that time I was calling it reflexive health, and now it makes my toes curl. But when I think of it now, I don't think reflexive health. I think movement development.
Mm.
So it has all the grown up joint mechanics that we theoretically should have if all has gone swimmingly well. And so that's out there. And then I have all sorts of video courses on Thinkific. But if you go to the shop where the book is, so that we're not on Amazon, I had to come off Amazon. Oh my God, it was, it was, yeah, we were way too small for Amazon. That did not work. So we sell from my website. My website is Helen-Hall, that's HALL.co.uk. And in the shop, you'll see the book, My Running Tour, the Lemny, and the courses. And for those who work with people with pain and repetitive injury, any kind of body worker of any description, there's the theory side of what I consider to be the top six movement development hiccups I see all the time. I saw them just so all the time. It's like, oh my God, I'm seeing this all the time. We should sort this out. People, you can just sort this out yourself. You don't need to come to clinic. I'm seeing it all the time. And it's almost like triage.
Mm.
So the troubleshooting checklist for walkers and runners, there's no theory. That's just, Simon says, do what Simon says. So just do this, see what happens. Do you find anything? If you find something, keep doing it. And then the other courses, the courses, the modules 1 to 6 is the troubleshooting checklist in detail with all the theory, all the measurements from Doris, all the explanations. So well, I hope they're interesting. I'm trying to help. It's very inefficient. I'm the self-proclaimed queen of efficiency. So to see people one at a time is very inefficient. So the book was written to try and be efficient. The courses have been made, and the first one, pilot modules 1 to 6, nearly killed me. Because I did it. I filmed them all myself and edited myself, and this was a skill set I did not have. So anyway, we got to the end, and they are so to help people so that they can help themselves, or people can help others. And there's one on stress incontinence. There's one on head position because people they can't find their head. and there's good reasons for it, and I understand, and there's help out there. And you'll find me acting. So people, I make these little videos on Insta, and I'm acting. I'm trying to act. I'm just mucking about, trying to act, trying to get a story across in. It's I don't allow them to be longer than 60 seconds. I'm trying to get a message across. And if I act it and have fun in games, it's easier to get a quick message across. And then some people have not realized that I'm acting and have sent messages of support and saying, I'm so sorry your ankle is so sore. No, 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 no. Honestly, no, it's not me. I'm acting so that you can relate it to. No, no, but I'm fine. But thank you for worrying about me.
That's sweet.
So yeah, so Insta is oh God, what is it again? Oh, I can't remember what my Insta is.
It's okay. I can find
Anyway.
it and write it down for
Yeah.
you. Yeah, put it in.
And then I've my Lego story, which is my offering to the world, my 17-minute video on taking a sliver of this brain science that we've been talking about and trying to create a story, a metaphorical story that just hopefully makes it much more obvious. And that's on my YouTube channel. It's called The Lego Story. And I do know my YouTube channel thingy because I've been on it recently. So it's at the PFM way. So Papa Foxtrot Mike, PFM way, at the PFM way.
That's perpetual forward motion, PFM.
Yes, 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 yes. I'm not on Facebook. I came off Facebook. Insta is something like, it's got PFM in it. It's either PFM Helen Hall or Helen Hall PFM, something like that. But yes, so thank you for enabling me to say all of that.
Of course, my pleasure. I feel like we just scratched the surface, and I always have a list of topics, and we barely touched them. So we'll just have to chat again sometime, Helen.
Oh, well, I do. I was answering some really interesting questions, and I think I went off on some tangents of my own and didn't quite get to finishing them all. And this I must get better at because
That's
they were
okay.
really, really good questions.
Well, I didn't even ask anything about you. I was hoping to learn a bit about how you even got into this and what is yeah, your background, and but we'll cover that another time, perhaps.
Another time.
Should we
Yeah.
dare? Well, anyway, thank you so much, Helen. This was so fun. Lovely to catch up
Well,
again.
thank you. The pleasure was all mine.
Good. All right. Well, have a great day.
Cheerio.